it's a kind of way of arranging historical fact to kind of have a narrative, and that narrative always has a purpose.
Well, I teach 2 classes, but it's kind of always with some trepidation when I deal with issues of ethnicity. I prefer to use the word ethnicity, but it's quite a mouthful, so sometimes I slip between the two. And related issues, because they are never easy, they're very complex, and there's so many viewpoints, and sometimes we can agree to disagree, but sometimes we very strongly disagree, and of course, in the real world out there, sometimes people even fight about it. Yeah? So anyway, I braced myself for today, as I but I'm glad to see that most people are students.
Just look very young.
Yeah. I thought that I start off lightly by talking about how I came to work on this topic, a very difficult topic, and then and why I have persisted. Given the time factor though, I would just say that having grown up in what was Kuala Lumpur in the 50s and 60s until I left, and University in Malaysia. I left at the age of 25, and I've been to a few places. I've settled in Singapore. But having grown up in those formative years, I think a sense of ethnicity is very strong. And I happen to grow up in a place that I would say is quite multicultural. In fact, the majority of the population in that area was Indian, probably, okay? Because they were largely railway workers, and my classmates were mostly children of railway workers. But we had a good mix of Chinese, Asians, Malays, especially in the outlying villages and so forth. So I think that sensitized me, and going in a coffee shop. On top of that, a little coffee shop, nothing like kopitiam here. My father had 5 tables, and we work in front, but we sleep at the back of the house. It was my window to the world, and I so that whether it was everyday life on this one main street, special events. For example, whenever the chariots carried the Hindu gods, all the children will go, and including me, I would be lifted up to be blessed by the deities. So it was quite an experience. And of course, during the May 13th riots, I woke up to a certain extent, but I was only 15 at that time. So my thoughts then and my thoughts now about riots when I look back. So I dare say that I have a little bit of rootedness, and perhaps more sensitivity and more interest in following the issues right through my life. And so when I came to Singapore, I first, well, to cut the story short, I wanted to work on ethnic relations in the housing estates, because I noticed that people were being moved and resettled from various places, including more ethnic enclaves, okay, historical enclaves, so quite mixed, but mostly quite ethnic based, into housing estates, and you're expected to live together. So the long and short was, I started on that. But I encountered various issues along the way, including why do you want to work on a topic like that? And then having worked on it and tried to publish it, I couldn't find a local publisher, okay? I actually wanted to support local publishing, but perhaps I was a little bit ahead of my time. So it didn't get published. I went to Oxford University Press, which is, of course, one of the mainstream criteria which are judged successfully as up-and-coming, as a potential academic, but I had no choice. But I would and then I did another book later on, Beyond Rituals and Riots, some of whom I have come across that. And for that, again, I had to rethink the title towards the end. Oh, we have never had riots in the last 40 years. Why do you want the title to have the word riot, But I said, look, I said Beyond Rituals and Riots. You're going to play with words for a title. Anyway, I'm glad to fast forward. I think we have come some way, okay, from those times. There's a lot more literature. We're able to speak like this. So I would just say that while race and religion are still considered sensitive, and we never know when forces at work outside, inside, including the state, can step in to affect the discourse, the opening up discourse. It is still true that on the whole we're able to better talk about it. So it's in that spirit I think we can today share, quite frankly, I like to be frank. I reach an age where there's nothing to hide. And no jobs to protect anymore, you know. So, well, because when I did the Beyond Rituals and Riots book, I was asked to pull out some chapters. I said, hey, how? You know, how can we do this? You know, the book is already printed, etc., etc. Okay. Anyway, so my reflections in this chapter, I would say I took it very seriously, even though I was given only the space of 10 pages. So I tried to be succinct. I'm not sure if I'm ever successful at being succinct, but I reflected on what I think should go in 10 pages about Singapore, having worked on it in the last 20 odd years. Okay? So basically, I think that, as with many other places, when we talk about race or ethnicity, it's so diverse, so complex and everything, and there's so many dimensions. I decided to put it as both a maze, which is wondrous, exciting. You can even get happy about, oh, I found a way out, right? But it's also a minefield. You don't know when you're going to step on something that's going to kaboom, you know? Whether it's yourself, say, hey, you are racist, okay? Oh, did I make a racist remark? Did I have that stereotype? Maybe even unaware of it, okay? Big conflicts. I've never seen a war, but I've seen a riot, an ethnic riot in Kuala Lumpur that's close enough to London, okay? Because it lasted 2 weeks, etc. So I basically think that depending on how we manage things, and we have to take into account history, sociological, political forces, it's always a maze and a minefield. So I picked out 4 areas to look at. One is on cultural diversity itself, and I show how, I argue how, well, there's a lot to be celebratory about. Sometimes, and contemporarily, there are some issues with the politics of culture and heritage. So that, I gave an example there. Peranakans, for example, promote their culture as Peranakan. But some other groups feel that their contribution has been marginalized, underrepresented, understated. Okay? And so that's been played out. Okay? I don't know what will surface, but it could be, we could take a turn, depending on how we are going to deal with it. Okay? The other area I look at is common spaces. That's very big, but I picked on the HDB because that's the majority where people live. And I show how some of the, I did my research 25 years ago, so I pulled out some of the main areas of tension. It may not seem important to you, but it's very important to some other people. You have to remember that. Now, sometimes we think race is not important, culture is not important, but it's very important to other people. And from a distance, it's easy to say it doesn't matter, but when you have to live every day, cheek by jowl, okay, when somebody burns the incense right in front of your block, what are you going to do? Okay, how are you going to see it? Are you going to see it as pollution, or are you going to see it as what? Okay, so those issues.
There was in your chapter you explained how, for example, in the Chinese funeral, like the time sensitivity to it.
Yes.
The Malay wedding.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm taking too much time already, so I'm hurrying through it. So I showed how in the early days when people first moved in, there's a really real problem of not just the physical problem of a wedding and a funeral, but symbolically, in anthropology, symbolic meaning is very important. What does this say? Who is, you know, why do you get priority to have your funeral there when I had booked this avoid that 2 months ago for my wedding. He said, and there are all these other surrounding meanings why people want to hold a wedding or a funeral right where they live. So there are sometimes, you know, contending meanings even. Okay? So how to deal with it, and I traced how HDB had to deal with it and how people have to learn to deal with it, so that by today we more or less have modus operandi that is quite peaceful. But my point in this article is that you can't take it for granted. It took time to evolve, and that every generation has to be socialized into it. New immigrants have also to be socialized into it, okay? You can't just say it's dead. Everybody has to be socialized with not just civility, but with some degree of cultural competence to say, okay, that's why they do it this way. No, let's give some room for this for it. Yeah? My third area that I pulled out was on racism and structural inequalities. A lot to say there. A lot to say there, so maybe we leave it for discussion time. But I did focus on marginalization of Malays and stereotyping. And I would love to have a discussion, frankly, on that. I did recommend, you know, sometimes we talk about inequalities. It's very much the race-class intersection. So we have to be very careful with that. But specifically for Malays, I feel that we really need, I call for re-examination of SAF policies. Okay, so I try to be concrete as well. And for that matter, civil defense and the police forces, because they all take a life of its own. And my last area that I looked at, and I think Lavi would have a lot to say about that too, is immigration, integration, and citizenship. Again, very big, very big. I actually got into a little depression working on this project, because I realized that there's so much unhappiness there, so much inequality there, so much misunderstanding, so much stereotyping. But I think one thing good that's come out of that is that well, I would say good for me at least. I said, look, there are all these big terms being thrown about xenophobia, anti-immigrant, this, that, racism, and so on and so forth. I think it is really high time we unpack all that and understand that this very complex phenomena in our own context, but we can look at how in other countries they are managing it. It's going on. Okay, it's live. Okay, so how we respond is going to be very, very important. So okay, I think I've said enough.
Okay, so thanks, Ayn. So I've been reading Ayn's work for years, of course, and you know, really enjoy it. So I recommend that you read some of her work too. But as for me, maybe a little bit about, I actually came to write about race and ethnicity through migration. So I'm actually a migration scholar. So I worked on labor migration of these low-wage, labor migrants, the guys who work in construction and shipyard and factories to Dubai from India. That was my early work. And then now I work on this group in Singapore as well. And when you work on these low-wage migrants, right, you cannot avoid the question of ethnicity or of race, right? So my entry point has really been from migration, and now I also look at migration more generally and immigration. So middle class, migrants are new citizens in Singapore as well. So that's kind of where my entry point is. So with the CMIO, the chapter in the MIDS book, right? One of the key points I think I wanted to make was about race, and I definitely agree with Ayn that ethnicity is a much more elegant term because it acknowledges the complexities of this particular label, right? But I think in Singapore and in the book as well, I use race quite self-consciously because we are a multiracial nation, right? So race is on our ICs. Like when I used to work in a German research institute. When I told them, I passed around my IC, I said we have race on our ICs, they were shocked, right? Coming from the history of the Holocaust and everything. So they couldn't believe that we were, still being typecast according to this idea of race. And I think race is problematic because it has these biological connotations, right? Of some biological essentialism, that if you're this race, you have these characteristics, you look like this, or this is your culture, or this is. So I think that's one of the problems with the CMIO categorization, because unlike the multiculturalism that Aing writes about, which happens on the everyday, right? I think the state discourse is slightly different. It has this, it has a tendency to emphasize that essentializing component. I think, and we saw it with some of the controversy around the elected presidency, right, recently, like what does being a Malay mean, as if that there's something biological about that we can pinpoint, right? Because we know that race is a social construct, it's not a biological entity. So that's one thing that I think is problematic, and that I wanted to point out in the chapter. And the myth of the race riots, I think, adds to that. Like as Diana was saying, because it's, we still use the race riot, something that happened like in your book. It happened so long ago, right? You're not allowed to use it in your book title, but then we still have to talk about it every racial harmony day, right? All the kids go to school and they have to remember it. So why is this so present? And I feel it's unnecessary, because the narrative of the racial riots makes it seem as if races cannot get along. We need the state, the government there, or somebody there to say, okay, you have to follow this policy, or you have to live here, or you have to do this in order for us to get along, right? And I think some of the policies we have in terms of mixed housing in HDB estates, they have been largely successful, right? As I said, like they have, this, we've evolved them over years, and they've been largely successful in terms of people living together. So I'm not saying that everything is bad. What I'm saying is the basis on which this type of model is suggested is problematic, because why is the starting point that different races can't get along, right? The starting point should be why can't it be that different races can get along, right? So I think for me that's one of the problems that I wanted to highlight in the chapter.
And the CMIO categorization you mentioned is also not in line with most developed nations, right?
Yeah, so a lot of in a lot of countries, like when you're doing a census, you decide which category you identify with most. So for example, in the US, you decide, are you Hispanic, are you, which category you want to fall into. Or in Australia, the census asks about your ancestry. They don't ask you about race or ethnicity. They ask you about ancestry, and they say, which ancestry do you identify with most? And you can identify multiple, right? Not just one as well. And it's a much more plural model than the Singapore's 4 model. So, it's also limiting, I think, and in the chapter I talk a little bit about the collapsing of differences within these categories, like, the loss of a lot of dialects, Hokkien and Teochew and stuff, because of the Speak Mandarin campaign. Everyone is Chinese, right? And with the Indian community now, there's a lot of issues around what is an Indian, because of the new migrants, the new migrant Indians who have come in the last 15 years or so to Singapore. So this is something that I'm working on now, right? And we see like people want to disassociate within the category of Indianness or within the category of Chineseness, as you mentioned in your chapter as well with the PRC, new migrants from the PRC, right? There's a distancing of the Singaporean Chinese from these new migrants as well. So again, these categories are breaking down now. That's why I thought it was important to emphasize these problems now, right? And I think, like Aing, I think it's important to, I tried to end the chapter with, saying it's important to value cultural diversity, right? I'm not advocating anti-foreigner sentiment, because it's, when you talk about these divisions between local and foreigners, it's very easy to be categorized as anti-foreigner, right? So I'm definitely not saying that. I'm married to a foreigner, so I'm not anti-foreigner by any stretch, but I think, like Aing's chapter says, we need to be more cognizant of our integration policies, and we need to be a little bit more careful about the ways in which we assume integration is going to happen. Just because you speak the same language as me, you eat the same food, or you are the same religion, doesn't mean that you're going to immediately, assimilate into my group, right? We've seen that that hasn't worked. So that there are other cultural reasons, I think, that have stopped that kind of easy integration from happening. So we need to examine, how can we just integrate these, whether it's new PRC migrants or new Indian migrants, into these Indian or Chinese categories so easily like that, right? Does it make sense still? So I'm calling for a rethinking of these kind of categorizations. So inherently there are problems within the categories themselves, but then also the model is now, I feel, breaking apart. Or it's, you can see the fractures and the problems with the model.
Yeah, like basically you mentioned in your essay that because of the CMIO model, we kind of see it as race. Yeah, and we kind of view it as an essential thing instead of something that was imposed on us by the state. And so that's actually quite sinister. And I think drawing on what you said about immigration, I think maybe we can have a discussion because I think you talked about it as well in your essay, like how the past 15 years immigration has sort of changed the way we understand race relations and changed the race landscape.
Well, before we move to immigration, I would like to pick up on what Laavanya talked about race. And I also clarified in the chapter, I tried to clarify the distinction and yet the overlap between race and ethnicity. But I think historically, we need to have a nuanced understanding of why the term race has become so institutionalized in Singapore, so that we can explain to people, not that we accept it, some of us don't accept it, some of us still do, but I think we'll give a historical explanation to it. We are better off, explaining why it's on our IC. Okay? Hopefully it disappears. I personally would like it to disappear, something else appear, okay? Because some people do want to be identified by their ethnicity, okay? I cannot think of anywhere in the world where people do not want to be identified by some cultural group, okay? Not necessarily biological, although of course there are some people who do. So there's some overlap there, but independently I think you can talk about heritage when talking about race, okay, and your ancestry, and so on and so forth. But we inherited that from the British, okay? Uncritically, the government just continued it, okay? And then we developed it further. I would say, when I explain, especially to my foreign friends, when we use the word race, it's very carelessly and loosely used. But in actual fact, we actually talk more, we're thinking more about our ancestry culture. That we are of Chinese origin or Indian origin, broadly speaking, Malay origins. Then there is another layer. Sometimes, of course, physically there are differences. Actually, in anthropology, you do have 5 races in the world. Mongoloid, Caucasoid. I can't remember now. But of course, there's a lot of evolution has taken place, mixture has taken place, especially with a lot of intermarriages over a long period. So where do you fit this? That's why it's complicated. Yeah? But I would just like to clarify that it would be good to explain whenever you get a foreigner, especially who's so shocked, especially from the West. How come you all use the word race? It's taboo, That's because they have rejected white biological racism, okay? It's no more there. But it was a term that was derived from there and imposed on us and recruited, okay? So that's one clarification. When it comes, okay, we jump to immigration, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to come to
you.
Oh, moderator? Yeah, what do you want to say?
Okay, maybe we can contextualize the CMIO.
Talk about the historical.
Yeah, because it was inherited from the British, like it's kind of like dividing and then converting to manage the population. So what are some of like the political purposes of the CMIO?
I think the British model was not CMIO, right? It was a little bit more complicated, I think. So it's now been developed into the CMIO. So there's been some other categories have been got rid of, and others have been added perhaps. But yeah, we've come up with this CMIO, and I think it was used as a tool of management, of course, of population. And you all know, of course, like housing, welfare, and all these things are distributed in some ways via this model. But I think one of the things that sociologists have pointed out, and local sociologists have pointed out, is that it's caused racialization, right? One of the effects that means it's caused particular groups to be associated with particular categories, stereotypes basically, and Ayn also mentions this in her chapter, particularly in relation to the Malay community. And I think that's one of the political outcomes that we don't necessarily want, right? Because they're problematic outcomes. And I think we still see that happening. I mean, you all remember just a few weeks ago with the diabetes issue, and like the Malays and Indians are eating this kind of food, therefore, so that's kind of an example of socialization, right? We still see it happening. And I think that's problematic because, I mean, Malays and Indians also eat lots of other food, and it's a stereotype, right? That's not true, I think, a lot of the time. And I think it's problematic to then associate that type of behavior with a type of group. So I think that's what, for me, one of the biggest political issues with race, right? The CMIO type of racialization. Maybe I can pick up that relation to the...
Okay, I like to look back at the past. I think Nirmala Purushottam would be very good to talk about censuses during the British time, how they broke the populations up into different categories and how it evolved over time. By today, then we have these broad categories of Chinese, Malay, Indians, and others. Okay? But during the British time, they had these categories, but they also had other subcategories. I think if you go back and ask your grandparents, you might find, for example, they didn't say Muslims, they say Mohammedans, right? And so forth. And then I think some of the dialect groups were captured as well. But basically, having inherited the broad categories that the British used for administrative purposes, they became sort of developed and institutionalized and applied. I think the dangerous thing that happened was that they began to be applied uncritically to different aspects of social life. Okay, so that where the motorist, and it also affects people's perceptions. Okay, if a motorist is a motorist, why do we have to say that Chinese motorist? Okay, when is it relevant to say it's a Malay motorist or motorbikist, and when it's not? Okay, but basically it got so institutionalized in government that it began to apply to various things, criteria, okay, and for outcomes, performances, and outcomes. So that, for example, PSLE, O-level education is very, very good example. Malays, how they perform, Chinese, how they perform, and so on. Now, I would say try to always remember that our historical time period is very short. Okay, you can argue that consciousness is very hard to change on top of, because of this CMIO making it worse. So it's very hard to get out of those frames, okay? But we strengthen those frames even further. Having said that, I would say sometimes though, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, okay? Some categories are important, okay? But we must have other categories to put it together with a more sophisticated approach. So that I would argue, when it comes to education, we're going to have national statistics, irrespective of your ethnic background. Okay, we should have socio-economic equating with maybe approximating with class, And then you can have a subsection on ethnicity to the extent, if you think that's relevant. And I do think there is some relevance there. Okay? So that you are looking at at least three sets of figures at the same time, rather than one. Same with health. Okay? You should have national statistics on health. Okay? But it is also true that different ethnicities, in terms of their historical foods, is example. I mean, scientifically, it can be shown whether it's Chinese food, Malay food, Indian food, whatever, can have certain health implications if you take too much of it. Okay, so we can have that kind of breakdown. Then we can have another set of figures that look at the ethnic distribution, but always never putting the ethnic distribution at the top as the biggest, because then you tend to zoom in on that group. Okay, but the other question is, why do some people like to zoom in on this group? Okay, and that's got to do with, I think some people argue about Chinese privilege, worldview, perception, majority versus minorities perception of things. So, and majority members, well, they are Chinese, and if they are not aware of some of these dimensions, they will say nothing. They don't see anything wrong with pointing out that, oh, okay, more Malays got diabetes. You know, it's just a fact to them without the historical understanding. If they had the historical understanding, I bet they would actually be better. They would more likely than not give you a set of national statistics first, okay, and then give you another set of statistics by socioeconomic background, by this or by that. So my argument is, when is it relevant to insert ethnicity? When is it not? When is it relevant to insert other dimensions that they're actually not important?
I mean, like, that's like the thing about racialization and stereotypes, right? And when you mentioned the diabetes of people, and I'm thinking, okay, I mean, I guess the thing about stereotypes is not that they are objectively untrue, but it's like they're incomplete. They're like an impoverished way of saying. So, I mean, I guess like racialization really conditioned us to see in a really impoverished way, in incomplete way. We kind of zero in on race and then kind of just think, oh, the person is lazy because he's Malay or something like that. You know? So I mean,
the cultural argument then becomes the one like, oh, it's, you know, like these cultures have bad eating habits, right? Rather, but can we really prove that it's cultures that have bad eating habits, or is it a socioeconomic issue, right? Because we know, like, across the world, in developed countries, especially like in the US, you know, of course, you know, diabetes in Australia is the Aboriginal community, right? They have very high bad health outcomes. But why these communities? It's because they are lower socioeconomic class. They, you know, one is the food, the types of food that they can afford to eat, but it's also education, right? They might not be as well educated about good eating choices as middle class people. So, you know, that link has been shown much more accurately than a cultural explanation to, you know, culture linked to race, the explanation for unhealthy eating habits and, you know, early death rates and things like that. So,
city living also, like they kind of notice that people who live in dense cities tend to be more susceptible to diabetes, and added on with, like, you know, socioeconomic factors.
I think definitely the CMIO overemphasis tends to place the burden on culture, like cultural manifestations, cultural expressions, cultural consequences on cultural groups, and that is equated with your ethnic groups. Okay. As a cultural anthropologist, I have a problem. Okay, you can't just write off culture and deny it, you know. I think the challenge actually for a diverse society like ours is actually therefore be very much more sophisticated and more complicated in our understanding. It's not easy, okay? If you live in a relatively homogeneous society, I don't know if there is there is one like that anymore, okay, then it could be easier. But the challenge is that we live in such a diverse society, therefore our frames of analysis have to be very complicated, okay? And we can think of so many things that we can look at in a different way and in a more sophisticated way, okay? We talked about education, it's like social problems, you know. Let's not deny that some things that do occur in some groups are stronger, okay? But like Laavanya has pointed out, it's really the intersection of so many forces at work, okay? So, I would like to think that if we talked about Chinese gambling, which we don't talk about very much, we tend to focus more on drug addiction on the ladies, okay? I'd like to categorize that for analytical reasons so that we can still deal with it realistically as subcultures. As subcultures, and maybe very strong. And the sophistication, I think the challenge is at the same time to see how some cultural manifestations, some cultural influences are there. They are just there. If you look at Chinese gambling, for example, I mean the stereotype, if you just have a discussion on gambling among Chinese people, it's as if you're born with it. The Chinese have a propensity to gamble. You know, that's the way it's put in popular thinking. And it's been there for so long that it's very hard to change. Okay? Very, very hard to change. You go to any of the casinos, anywhere in the world, the Chinese dominate. Okay? You hear in Australia, for example, how in Chinatown, right? Buses that will ferry people, Chinese people from Chinatown to the casinos. Right? But the same problem here. So it's what you want to look at. You want to look at. And let's admit it, there are some real problems. But I would like to say that it's a subcultural problem. Okay, very strong maybe. I'll be very honest. My mother was a gambler. She became an addict. I grew up having to follow her around. Okay, and I said, oh, why are these people all gambling? They're all Chinese, all the coffee shops, and so on and so forth, okay? You won't find Malay gambling, you won't find Indian gambling. But in my time, there were enough stereotyping growing up in Kuala Lumpur, okay? Indians tend to drink, okay? Then it became a stereotype. Indians are usually alcoholics. You know how it jumps, that kind of development, okay? Yeah, so I just say, therefore the challenge is how to have very nuanced, sophisticated. You just need to be more sophisticated living in a diverse situation like Singapore. There's no way. If you have a simplistic way of looking at things, yeah, you will live, but you will tend to stereotype, you will tend to essentialize much more than somebody who's trying to grapple with, come some people like this, but some people are not, some people like that, some people are not. But they're all Chinese, how come you're like, you know, you get very confused. But I rather the confusion and the complexity than a very simplistic way of applying characteristics.
Yes. And I think it's quite confusing. I mean, because like on the one hand we are told like we are kind of like multicultural whole space, and at the same time there's this whole CMIO category and it really racializes the way we think. So I mean, what do you think are some direct ways as individuals, I mean, as like people in the group can empower themselves to actually in their everyday interactions really resist that, because you know we kind of have to resist conditioning, and the media really still churns out the same kind of racialized views on so many issues.
I think we, as I said, we can't abandon race or culture. We need to acknowledge it, but not in the stereotyped ways in which perhaps we've been taught to think, right? So, you know, for instance, I think there is a value in affirmative action, for example, right? For communities that are not, do not get the same chances as other communities, right? We've seen how this works in, sometimes it works well in some countries, I think, and I think there is a place for that. And to do that, we have to think in terms of culture, or in terms of some kind of categorization, maybe ethnicity or even class, right? Most of the time it's in terms of ethnicity and culture and things. So I think, so we cannot say, no, I'm going to be post-culture or post-race. I think that's perhaps not possible and not even the best way forward. I don't know, what do you think? But so I think we need, we need to acknowledge that there is difference and some of that is racialized. But not, we shouldn't think in stereotyped ways about this difference. In fact, I think we should be aware of power hierarchies, right? That's the best way, I think, for me to think about racialized difference, or whether it's difference in class or gender, right? What experiences could this person have had because of their race, their gender, their socioeconomic class, and how do I then relate to them? I mean, amongst other things, their disability status, whatever it is, but how then could those factors have shaped their experience that are different from mine? They might not have had the privileges I've had, opportunities, or they might have had more opportunities and privileges, and how do we relate on that basis, right? Seeing people as shaped by these social forces rather than as inherently having particular characteristics. So that's how I don't know if that's an easy way of...
I think definitely power relations are involved. It's such a big area here. And perhaps if people are interested, maybe later we can open the discussion a bit about majority, minority relations and Chinese privilege in particular. But at another level, I think it's really about multiple identities that people actually have. Okay, some people have more multiple identities than others. Okay, and depending on the situation, it doesn't seem to be fashionable anymore to talk about situational ethnicity. But in my time when I was an undergrad, we talked a lot about situational ethnicity. Okay, so that you play the ethnic game, so to speak, depending on the situation, what kind of resources we have. Okay, but I think more importantly, we all have multiple identities. So that depending on the context and the situation, some identities surface as more salient than others. Okay, so if you, let me just use my own examples because I can't remember some of the research things anymore, especially when it comes to percentages and so on and so forth. I used to work in IPS and they like to do surveys, so I cannot remember. Maybe it is good to go to the individual level because I think that is where the challenge of diversity very often is. You've got to make a decision what is important. Okay, so that, for example, when am I a woman most important to me? Okay. When am I a human being most important? Okay, it depends on what we're talking about. Okay, it's easier said than done, of course, but I think an important aspect of depending on the significance of an event or a development, then I have to relate to it. What is most important to me? It does not matter that the Rohingyas are Muslims. I feel very pained by it. Not that I can do very much, but that's because I am relating to them as human beings, raised on certain values about compassion. Okay, and that becomes very important for me. So when I got all these texts from my KL friends who say, no, the Rohingyas in KL are very demanding people, okay? Because they've got this card now, and they flash the cards and they want their rights and so on and so forth. I say, hey, be careful here because it is your individual experience, and also it may be true that there are some individual Rohingyas that can be quite demanding, okay? And maybe they are demanding because they have so little, they really have become like that. I think you've got to make a distinction between that and what's going on right now, you know, and where's your sense of humanity, blah, 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 blah. So here, my identity as a human being is most important. Okay. If I march on the street, I would be marching as a Muslim, okay, because Muslim Rohingyas are Muslim, but because they're humans. Right? So again, so you can think of various other identities. I'll give you another example. As growing up, there was a huge flood in 1970 in Kuala Lumpur. And in the coffee shop, some people, in my father's coffee shop, some people talk about, oh, a boy fell into the river and drowned. And I was, at that time, I think I was 14. So, you know, when you're 14, you're very sensitive. Huh? Oh, a schoolboy drowned, you know, in the river. I know that river, Bombard River. The first thing one of the guys said was that a Chinese boy or a Malay boy? And somebody said, Malay boy. After that, you're not interested anymore. And that really shocked me. Okay, see, where is your identity? Okay, that is most important. I think that is a challenge in today's society that we live in. Of course, some of us change. Some of us are very strong with our ethnic identity. That's fine, you know, but some of us are hybridized. So sometimes you talk to me about Chinese culture, it doesn't resonate with me so much anymore. I went to Hainan Island, you know, where my parents came from, and they were assuming that I would be so Hainanese, and they were assuming that I feel so strongly about the Chinese diaspora. I don't, because the first thing they asked me was, can I enter into economic investments with them? This is second day, you know. So I was telling my sister who went with me, I said, I think if I have money, I will invest in some social enterprise or some charities in Singapore. Why would I go and put it in Hainan Island? There's so much corruption going on there. They can see to the corruption and they'll have enough money. You know, because the Hainanese Chinese identity no longer resonates with me. I just wanted to go and see my parents' villages, that's all. Okay, that's all.
I mean, I have a question about, because you talked about affirmative action and how that possibly needed and that can help, but and you talk about the focus on the individual, and I was wondering, you know, like, actually I should open the floor.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'll take 2 questions at a time. Is that okay? So just introduce yourself, your name, and then briefly your question, and then who you want to ask. Or both, yeah.
So I'm Brian, I am a student. And so, well, this is on something what you said, but maybe a question to all of you. You said that if you were going to march outside the Rohingya, you're not going to march as a Muslim or as a human being. But, so how much of that is dependent on where you are? So maybe also in KL, if you are marching and protesting in Jakarta, a lot of commentators there are protesting precisely because they are Muslims and they see fellow Muslims being persecuted. Not because they see that it's a fellow ASEAN member or anything like that, it's because they're Muslims. And is that any less valid than marching because you're a human being? And on the other hand, one of the interesting phenomena I see is that the Thai and Bangkok commentators are not sympathetic with the Myanmar people, even though they're Buddhists and Buddhists, I thought they were sympathetic. But they're not sympathetic to the Rohingya so much because they identify with the Muslims, because Thailand also has its own problems with Muslim minorities, but because as Thai, they are anti-Myanmar. So how much of that is as valid as marching because you have Muslim solidarity, or marching because you have human solidarity?
Any other questions?
Lily. Okay, so my name is Lily, and I'm just regular Singapore citizen. I wanted to ask you to take us a little further back, both of you, to something maybe a little bit more theoretical, as in this categorizing by race. I think as human beings, we all love difference, and we all want a way to kind of make ourselves feel special. Even as homogenous as China is, I mean not China, Japan is. They have all kinds of hierarchy, and I think we touched on the power play of it all. I wanted to ask, when does this kind of CMIO or CMIO, CMI, and the O +++, all these things that have been done in history in Singapore, when does it become dangerous from a, if you take it from a theory point of view, right? It's, I mean, I can make up stuff, as in, well, I mean, you look at what happened in World War II and the rise of Hitler. That actually came from what happened in World War I and how people were treated and all that. So can you take us, and I know this is not supposed to be a long lecture, but just give us a few pointers. All these things that we're talking about, CMIO in Singapore, is it harmless? Really? Or is it, at what point does it become dangerous? From a critical point of view.
What do you mean by critical?
Theoretical. Framework. From a framework point of view. For example, if the treatment of the Jews, that kind of thing starts to happen, or the treatment of the Germans by the Allies in World War II, that kind of theory. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like what we're going through today. Am I supposed to be worried about this? Or is it just kind of like almost cultural fun?
We're not Chinese, we really worry about this. I don't understand
I would,
why this is. I feel it's already dangerous. I don't understand why.
She thinks it's dangerous. Why do you think it's dangerous? That's why I wanted to see whether or not some of us should think, wow, geez, this is really awful. Or, since you both are scholars, and you've taken a more critical look and a more objective look and a more historical look, to say, well, actually, for it to be really dangerous, these kinds of things need to start happening. And that's when it's really out of hand. Right?
Okay.
The Rohingya thing first.
Okay. Yeah. Since you asked the question first, you want to take this question? No, it's you want to. Okay, since I raised it, no. When I say if I choose to march down the street, okay, although it's hard in Singapore, you have to do that. I say that because I did that in KL, I did that in London. So I actually think, oh, if I could, I would. For what? Okay, for which ones? No, it doesn't mean that I think that people who march down the streets in Jakarta, Malaysia, because they're Muslims, they have a special affinity. I don't think that is any less a special affinity. But I think usually there are organized action usually have political motivations and political agendas. So even if I march, I would still think through who's organizing it, what is the agenda. I think that would be wise about it. When I was young, I marched down the street, I was a student, 1974. We marched against poverty. We were students, usually very no agenda other than end poverty, change the world.
Poor, right? It's also poor.
Very simple, very idealistic. I haven't lost some of it, I hope, but I'm wised up in something. Okay? Then when you're older, when I was older, I marched against nuclear disarmament. Okay? That's a broad coalition. That's acceptable to me. So, I'm not in Kuala Lumpur, I'm not in Jakarta, but if I was a Muslim in Kuala Lumpur or Jakarta, I think I would be thinking, I should be politically astute. What group is doing this? Can I have an alliance with some? Can I work with these people even with lower differences? Okay, so that kind of thing. That's my short answer to this. Yeah.
I think Ian's basically trying to say there's not a hierarchy in terms of affinity, in terms, like you can march because of religious affinity or national or humanistic. I mean, there's no hierarchy, right? She's not trying to say there's a hierarchy. She's just saying in this case, this is what she's drawing on, I guess.
And maybe actually you think about action. I like to think about action nowadays. I've stopped writing papers. I'm very tired of writing papers. I realize that time is short. I want to act. Think about who you want to work with. Easier said than done. Which groups you can have alliances with, without wanting a perfect fit. There's no perfect fit. You know, all the NGOs have problems. Big personality differences sometimes, right? Different views and so on. When can you work together still within that broad range of alliances? I like the word alliances, okay? It suggests compromise. I'm not afraid of compromises. The purists will say no compromise. No thank you. Okay. We take your very difficult area.
Yeah, I think the danger is when race becomes biologically essentialized. Right, there's this, as I mentioned early on, right, there are inherent characteristics associated with the race, and you cannot, there's no room for maneuver, there's no complexity, there's no nuance like Arling's arguing for. It's seen as fixed, and this is the race, and that allows people to behave in particular ways based on those characteristics, like during the Holocaust, right, or during other kind of ethnic cleansings. I think it's because people of this race are like this, and therefore we should hate them or discriminate against them or whatever based on those characteristics. I think that's problematic. And like in the US, they had this one-drop rule, right? Even if you had one drop of black blood, even if you looked white, but you had like some ancestor who was black, you were considered black, right? It's one-drop rule. So again, that's comes from some notion of biological essentialism, right? That if you have one drop of black blood, you're black, right? Well, we know that there's no such thing as race as a biological category. It's a social category that we behave. It's based on how we relate to each other, right? How we construct culture. But there is we cannot prove that someone is of a particular race, right? Because there is no way. We all have different kinds of ethnicities, ancestries mixed in to each other. We may be predominantly, having Indian ancestry or Chinese ancestry, but there is no concept of it, right? So to make decisions and based on that biological essentialism, I think it's when it's dangerous, and we've seen in history, right?
My brain is trying to think concretely about our history in the past. Okay, so that to think about were there critical times when we were so divided. Of course, during the colonial period, we were broadly divided. Sometimes deliberately so. Sometimes the forces just took his own life, had a life of his own, right? Masses of Chinese immigrants, Indian immigrants, that put in different sectors. You already had separation, right? You had segregation. I wouldn't say in the same sense as apartheid in South Africa, but you were physically in different parts of Malaya at that time, okay? Except that in the urban centers, and the urban centers, where you went to school, where you lived, and so on and so forth. So I would say I was very fortunate, for example, to live in an area where it's quite multicultural and central. Okay. But ethnicized ways of looking at politics especially, okay, and mobilization along political lines, ethnic politics. This was not just in Malaya, but throughout the colonized war, especially in Africa. I remember having to read a lot about Africa because there were tribal groups and so on and so forth. And when the conflicts that is already in the past, okay, were accentuated because of colonial outcomes, policies and outcomes, it was all over the world, right? The colonized world. So Malaya was no exception. So that immediately after Second World War, right, before the British came back, during that critical 2 weeks, there was ethnic fighting. Malays were collaborators, okay, and they ran for each other. So in Johor, there are quite a lot of these attacks, okay? We are under research in that area. It needs very careful analysis and very careful interpretation, okay? And of course, you know, MCP was dominantly Chinese, but there were Malay sections in this. So you really have to dig into the history very carefully. But if you say today, what would... I think it's a gradual building up of forces so that I cannot imagine what can happen. But if we all don't like each other, okay, and we don't want to live with each other, I prefer to live in Hougang because it's mainly Chinese. I prefer to live in Woodlands. You can already begin to see that. I don't want to interact with this person. I don't want to sit inside this person. I did hear that, you know, when I was doing my research on some new immigrants, because they're not used to heterogeneous society like us. So, one of them, I'll be very frank about it, okay? I'm not singling them out, but this is an example. A new immigrant from China said, I don't want my child to sit beside an Indian child. No. When you get some Chinese who say, I don't want my children to play with Malay kids because bad influence, they don't want to study, they want to play football. That kind of stereotype, right? Yeah? Etc. Or the other stereotype is, I hope that my son or my daughter, my son won't marry a Chinese girl because Chinese women are very aggressive and gold diggers and that kind of, yeah, all those stereotypes. Those things, if they become broad enough, deep enough, and people mobilize against it, you just got to turn on that stereotype when the power difference is very great. You get that. You drive out the Jews, drive out the this, drive out the that. So, I mean, it's dangerous all the time, lah, you know?
There's always anxiety over difference.
I think in Aim's chapter as well, she points out that it's a lot to do with the, you know, when you have large rates of immigration, right? The infrastructural squeeze, you know, like my MRT is more crowded, you know, my house price has gone up, then it's exacerbated, right? So it's not just the existence of this stereotyping, but also these other structural factors, I think, that also make it, you know, more likely or maybe more dangerous that we start thinking in these, you know, us-them categories.
I don't know whether we're moving into immigration issues, you know, because this is the current reality that pushes us to tend to essentialize each other, stereotype each other, view each other at least with anxiety and some fear. And we really should try to crack that. I'm not saying there's no basis for anxiety. I think that there's some real basis for anxiety. It's very real. Yeah, but whether then we begin to swing so-called right-wing, very extreme nationalists, okay, get rid of all the empty foreign talent, okay, get rid of all the this, that, I think that is the important, that will be a turning point.
Any other questions, right?
Hi, to comment and a question. Keep it short. Yeah. Okay, hi, my name is Hazira, random member of the public. So the first comment I want to make is about diabetes and race and how thinking about race limits your ability to see information beyond what's presented. So a few days ago, I met my mom's diabetes doctor. Sorry, we're part of the statistics. So, you know, I had a discussion with her about diet and diabetes because my mom wasn't getting better. So she told me that after the PM talked about diabetes in the National Day rally, the diabetes specialist, because she's a specialist doctor, right, she became very stressed because now she's, you know, the spotlight is on them to try and tackle this. And then I got into it, then she said, and the interesting thing is she's Indian, right, and I'm Malay. But she said that, you know, that the article about the diet of our community is true. But I'm like, but you're Indian and I'm Malay and we don't have diabetes. So this fact is not true in terms of like, you can't generalize, right? She said, well, I'm a doctor, I see the numbers, so I know. But then I told her, what about class? Have you considered that? She said, yeah, you know, if you go to Orchard, right, there are healthier food options like salads. But you know, you go across the road of this poly and you can only see unhealthy options. I said, that itself is an indicator of class. But she said, yeah, that's true, but that's another discussion. Then I asked her, but is it? You know, so she must have been very annoyed, right? She's here, she has a lot of patience, but now just saying, I would just say, like, as a doctor who sees the numbers herself, she herself can't get away from this perception of risk, maybe because it's so limiting. You know, it's so simplistic that it becomes easy. I have a lot of patients, the PM says I must focus on this, therefore it's race. There's evidence. As a person, I see evidence that this is not true, but because it has been conditioned to think in a certain way, then it's true, it must be race. Even though by virtue of the two of us existing, we already contradict this narrative. Yeah, so it's very limited. And then, second, on race and structural inequalities, because Dr. Lai brought it up, right? I think the current presidential elections issue is a beautiful encapsulation of the issue, because even in my own household, you can see the divisive politics. So, on one hand, you have the people who think that the ends justify the means. So this would be my mother, actually. I don't care how she became president, but she's president, and that's the most important thing of all. So it ties in with what you said about symbols, right? Seeing one of my own. So this group thinks that the ends justify the means. It doesn't matter how she became president, she is president, and that's the most important thing. But there's another group who believe that the ends, the means, don't justify the ends. That means that if this is the way that we get a president, if we have to give up some things like democracy, then it's not worth the presidency. You know, and in just one household, you can have people who are raised from the same parent, or you know, eat the same food, consume the same kind of food. You can already have such divisive politics. You know, which is why when you talk about the Malay community's response towards her, right? It's also a very difficult thing because there are so many sections of the population that think differently towards how she was elected. So it's a bit, for me, those people who believe that the ends justify the means, it's a bit of like being in an abusive relationship. It's like saying, they love me enough to want to appoint one of my own as president. It doesn't matter all the previous things that were done, doesn't matter about SAF, doesn't matter about educational qualifications or access to educational resources, but they care about us enough to appoint one of our own. Don't you see? Yeah, that's what I've been asked that, don't you see? Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting.
I just wanted to ask, because you had brought up integration, but you also at one point had said, you had used the word assimilation. And I guess as you start thinking about migrants and thinking about these identities, you know, these different identities, how can you just talk a little bit, because, yeah, can you just talk a little bit more about it?
What is assimilation and integration?
Well, just in the sense that, I guess when you talk about how these foreigners come and they don't get it or they don't do this, and for me, where is the line drawn? And for me, that feels really vague. I know that some things when it is very negative and very offensive, you know, there is a line, but then sometimes there isn't. The line isn't so hard or
So assimilation, integration, I think, yeah, it's, I mean, assimilation has connotations of having, you know, there's already established norms, and then these people just come and they become part of our norms, right? So I'm sorry if I used it interchangeably because they're quite different. I think integration is much more about the two-way process, I think. So I would, you know, I would advocate for more integrationist policies. It's not just they who have to learn, you know, our social norms and how to live with difference, but we also have to make some effort to integrate migrants. It has to be two ways, right? And that's, I think, quite well acknowledged now in the scholarly literature, at least, that it should be two ways. So, but in terms of where the line is drawn, I think that's, yeah, it's always a difficult question. But I think that one of the problems for me with these policies is the assumption that these groups are going to fit into our pre-existing racial categories unproblematically because of certain shared, whether it's religion or language or food, right? And we've seen that it's not true. There are problems with, even within the racial categories, right, of assimilation. So I think that needs to be handled more carefully. And so with the CMIO categories, the O category has also diversified a lot. It used to stand for the Eurasian community. now it stands for, like everyone who's not CMNI, right? So it's mixed up, like Koreans mixed up with, white Australians mixed up with Filipinos, right? And I think that's also problematic, also because the Eurasian community is feeling, I think, underrepresented or not represented enough within the discourse of Singapore. So in terms of drawing the line, I think it really depends on each issue. And we need to think of perhaps a new way. If we want to stick with, I think it's important to acknowledge cultural difference, but maybe we need to think in more pluralistic ways, not just CMI and O.
I sometimes wonder, just very practically, because computer technology is so fantastic now, why can't we have an option where we can choose more categories in the census? What's the problem? Just what is the problem? I just don't get it. So really it's a political problem that some people out there say, okay, you will be fixed. Chinese, Malays, Indians, okay? But if you broke it down and you use other words for it, over time people will get used to it. And then you have a choice. You don't want, also can, but if you don't want, then some things, well, maybe it doesn't matter, maybe it does. Okay? So I don't know, we could be more brave, new world, experiment a little bit more. Okay? But when you say the line, sometimes it's very hard to draw the line. It shifts, right? It shifts. Cultures shift, cultures never fixed. So I think it's really about being very open. I think in diverse societies, you need to be relatively open to new ideas, new thinking, new ways of looking, new cultures. So if you ask me again, as a Chinese, of Chinese background, don't tell me this thing about eating shark fins for Chinese weddings. It's a must. It's not a must. No more. Okay? Don't say it's tradition. Must. I can do away with that tradition. Mind you, it doesn't seem very political. It's not very political, but it actually is. And you know that, like you're talking about in the family, the arguments over some of these things are very fierce, and actually the battle is really between individuals and in the family quite often. Quite often. Whether to wear tudung or not wear tudung, I'm sure some of you have that, right? Mother wants you to wear, you don't want to wear. Sister wants you to wear, you don't want to wear, For Chinese, we don't have this, but you have other problems like, especially religious conversion. Okay? One is a Christian, one is a Buddhist. What happens when there's a funeral? This is the challenge of diversity. Okay? We can laugh at it. Actually, that is a funny side. I was going to say, we have to be able to laugh at ourselves too. Some of us are very serious, cannot laugh. I have a class topic on ethnic joking. Right? Who can make ethnic jokes? Okay? Right? Who can make the same joke can be said by somebody who's a co-ethnic but not by somebody who's outside the room. Those kind of complications are very complicated. But I think we could be more mature about it. I can't judge the situation. I remember way back in 1974 when I was a undergraduate in Malaysia, we had to do Malaysian politics. Malaysian politics 101, 201, 301. It's very good when I think about it. And of course the three major political parties are UMNO, UMNO, MCA, okay, Malayan Chinese Association, and MIC, Malayan Indian Congress. But we can laugh at it and make jokes and say, UMNO, you may not oppose. You may not oppose. MCA, money conquers all. It's all based on stereotypes, right? Malayan Indian Congress, MIC, may I come? Oh, because you're always marginalized. You're excluded. So, and the whole class will be roaring away with laughter. Okay? Can I do that in Singapore? I don't know. But you should be able to sometimes, sometimes. And don't take offense. That's the other issue, taking offense. When do we take offense? When can we be a bit? I don't want to. I hope you're not thinking, oh, only Chinese privilege allows me to say that, you know. But I really think that sometimes, irrespective of your background, depending on the context, we can joke, we can laugh at it because this is our society. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. We can laugh at ourselves and be more mature about it, you know.
So we can take
oh yeah, structural.
Okay. Sorry. My name is Martin. I'm also a random Singaporean who likes to walk around Singapore. So when I found out that the statistics show that we have more than 1.5 million foreign workers, and out of them maybe about more than half of them are construction or in marine industry. So I was wondering how come we don't see them around, besides when they are working, what about when they are not working? So when I tried to find where these foreign workers are, I found that a lot of the what the government has done is to kind of physically separate them from us. So for example, the government has built recreational centers for these foreign workers. So when they are not working, they are at the recreational centers, and these recreational centers are so far away from us that it's even hard for locals to want to make friends with them or interact with them to get there. And then also there was this whole government project where they wanted to shift the where the Chinese are in Geylang, they wanted to shift that whole area to Kranji, just to get it away from us. And then I found that a lot of all these new migrants, the Chinese ones, are still in Geylang. They are there gambling. So I'm not sure whether how do we deal with this? How do we deal with new migrants and these kind of government policies to prevent interactions, and what kind of, like, do you see this as a problem?
segregation.
Yeah, just this kind of forced segregation that happens still.
I think it's a huge problem. Well, so I work with migrant workers, right? And it's very, I can't go into I need to get permission from MOM to go inside the dormitories to meet them, which is very difficult, so usually I meet them outside. So yeah, they're mostly housed in the edges of the island, so near Jurong, near my university. And then, places that are very hard to reach, right? So a very little public transport goes there, so it's very hard for them to also come out to other urban areas. So one is the physical separation, right? That is, I think, put in place by the state, but also maybe desirable to Singaporeans, right? Because remember the Serangoon Gardens incident a few years ago, where the residents of this private estate, Serangoon Gardens, didn't want the worker dormitory nearby. So we can't, I think, just blame the government. We also have to ask ourselves, do we have prejudice about these groups, right, that prevent us from wanting to live side by side with them? So think about Little India on Sundays too, right? People don't like going to Little India on Sundays because it's full of migrant workers, including Singaporean Indians, right? So it's not just a race thing, it's a culture, class, also gender thing because they're men, right? It's men. So I think, it's a problem, both in terms of the physical segregation, but also in terms of our attitudes to do with this group. And so, yeah, it is a problem, I think, and because, you see, there's a difference between these low-wage migrant workers and then the people who come on, employment passes, and then they get PR, then citizenship, right? These guys can't apply for PR or citizenship, so they are temporary. They are seen as temporary, even though when I work with them, sometimes I've lived here 10 years, 15 years, they might go back for 1 year in between, 3 months in between, but they are circular migrants, and they keep coming back. So they've lived here for much longer than some people who get PR. They've here for, 5 years, then apply for PR, and then, get PR, already go back to their home country, whatever. So these guys actually are, quite a big part of our society, I would say. So I think we need to do more to acknowledge their contribution, as well as domestic workers, right? They live in our homes. They help us raise our children, right? Yet they're seen as temporary. We don't have any integration policies for these groups of people, right? So it seems really shallow to me to depend so much on these people, and but yet we don't want to see them, we don't want anything to do with them, we just want them to do their work and disappear, right? So I think a lot more needs to be done in that case. And Geylang, I think also Little India, there's talk of moving out the migrant workers who actually live there to make it a more gentrified area, more like Arab Street kind of place. So no, I mean for commercial reasons, right? But then this is the area where a lot of these men also get their, they get some emotional support, they get some sense of community there. So I think it's it's problematic to remove these spaces as well from the lives of low-wage migrant workers. But I think for middle-class migrants, there's much more integration of them, especially the lower middle class. I think they're more integrated into HDB housing estates. But the upper middle class self-segregate as well. So we've heard stories of where I'm working now on Indian middle class migrants, right? Sometimes they all live in, they kind of dominate a particular condominium and take over the management committee. You hear these kind of stories, and then like change the football field into cricket, like kids play cricket. You hear these anecdotes, right? But there's some truth to the self-segregation element, because in doing interviews with some of these new migrants, you realize that their friendship circles, they don't really interact with Singaporeans. Or even go to Tanjung Ru, right? I mean, even though they are Singaporean, they're naturalized Singaporeans, all their friends are also naturalized foreigners. They are not local born Singaporeans. So there is some self-segregation there as well. So I think these two groups have very different relationships to the Singapore core or the rest of the Singaporeans. Can I answer that?
Yeah, of course.
Aware of time.
Okay. Well, I think you raised a very complex set of questions again. I think it's not just government in such a direct way. Government wants to control and leader. It's too simplistic. I think there's so many factors that are interplaying with each other, and space is really politics of space is really quite complicated. But I think I'd like to ask to say that what I find problematic is who qualifies for citizenship here. We have a bias towards this end, okay? The so-called foreign talent end as opposed to the worker end, okay? We have a very bifurcated immigration policy where it's quite clear. These were all, the workers were in construction, domestic service, blah, 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 lower end jobs, okay, poorer paying jobs, they are permanently in transits, okay? This end, I don't know now, but I think still is, very readily they get PR and citizenship, okay? I know because I have friends in that category. So I would like to see, and I think there's very clearly a status and class distinction, and sometimes it also falls along ethnic lines, okay, nationality, ethnic lines, yeah, and some stereotypes based on that. Then the other issue that actually Laavanya has raised, and which I also was beginning to be alerted to, is really that on immigrants and foreigners. Okay, I think we have to be a very nuanced understanding of different categories of people who come to live, work, and live here, okay, and unpack that. They're harder to study. Okay, some of them, especially those who have more mobility, yeah, they may not tell you why they're here. Okay. The construction worker will tell you why they're here. I'm very poor, I need the money, I'm going to go home in 5 years' time. Okay. Those who have mobility, may not tell you why they're here, and they may actually have locations in different places already. Okay, very hard to study. And also, what are the attitudes and so on and so forth. I don't want to stereotype, but I just tell you anecdotally, it tells you something. I was along Singapore River for a while because my hobby is to chase the otters. Okay? I went to Singapore River and my gosh, the whole place is so gentrified, full of condominiums, okay, and quite a large proportion are foreigners who live there. Okay, they expect to live there, maybe because of the backgrounds and so forth, jobs and so forth. But I was mortified when one of them said, "Oh, at last I meet a local who's interested in wildlife." I say, "Hello." No, obviously don't know anything about Nature Society of Singapore. Anyway, the point is that I think there's so many forces at work. Okay, there's a lot of class, status, politics at work, and again, both sides, so to speak, different groups of people really need to understand each other better and come together more often. And sometimes at work, you work. I think we need to do a lot of studies on work diversity. Okay. I have locals who tell me, for example, the notion of diversity is a very American concept. So they bring in this MNC's idea of diversity and diversity platforms. It's really related to gender, sexual orientation. Okay, when people here wanted to celebrate Racial Harmony Day, now that's not a very nice term, but you can change it. Why do they call it Diversity Day lah? But they don't want to celebrate it. They said, what is this? Okay, well actually it's something worth celebrating, but change the contents. Okay, so MNCs don't celebrate Racial Harmony Day. Okay, but they have a diversity platform. And then according to, this is my field work now, according to a local context, says diversity has been a way of bringing in through the back door a lot of foreigners and locals get displaced. So you see the politics is so complex, yeah. So a lot of room to try to open our minds to do more work before we come to any sort of clear-cut conclusion, if at all we want to make clear-cut conclusion, because the ground is always changing, you know.
So I think I'll just bring the discussion to a close. I think it's been really interesting, and I think we kind of like understood how CMIO in this category is a historical product, and how it kind of it's falling apart now, and how yeah, we kind of have to move beyond racialized thinking and try to be more intersectional in the way we try to understand our own issues, and our race consciousness basically really needs to be more nuanced. And also in the past 15 years with immigration, it really changes the race landscape that we have in Singapore, and I think the whole question of like, oh no, is there segregation going on, and how do we interact better, and how do we engage with actually fellow Singaporeans in a way, I think, and kind of break beyond nationalized thinking. I think Singaporeans are still we still think in very nationalized way. And yeah, also I guess how do we also balance personal action and like state intervention, because the problem with CMIO is also that it's a very top-down product, right? And state intervention can also be very problematic, but then at the same time we also need affirmative action. So I guess we kind of have to think about how do we balance these two things. And yeah, and I guess at the end of the day we kind of need more discussions like this, and try to see how we can talk in a way that is actually more natural to our everyday life when we interact with each other, in a way that isn't in the CMIO model way that the state kind of enforces on us.
No, I think it's important to just talk, right? Like I tell my students always like, can I work on this? And I say, yeah, you should be working on this. You know, this is precisely what. So I think this is a great starting point, and we should keep talking about these issues. Yeah.
So thank you very